Welcome to this presentation on plagiarism. The goal for this video is to help you understand what plagiarism is and is not, PBA's position on plagiarism, and the consequences of plagiarism, even if it is unintentional. I'll also share some tips with you for how to avoid plagiarism. In this presentation, you will hear the definition of plagiarism several times and in various ways. This is offered in order to help you best understand the definition. Be sure to listen carefully. Your academic and professional career depends on it. This man was in the news in Palm Beach County a few years ago. While he may not be familiar to you or even to the people in his audience at the time, his speech was very familiar to many who heard it. His name is Mark Stenner, and he was the principal of West Boca Raton High School. His commencement speech was plagiarized from a speech that Professor David McCullough Jr. delivered at Wellesley College in 2012, a speech that went viral on YouTube and is now one of the most popular speeches in American history. An analysis of the speech by the Palm Beach Post and iAuthenticate.com indicated that 87% of Stenner's speech was lifted word for word from McCullough's original speech. The school district also discovered that Stenner's 2014 commencement speech was plagiarized, mostly word for word, from another commencement speech delivered by Mark S. Lewis at the University of Texas. So what happened to Mr. Stenner? He lost his job as principal and was reassigned to a non-instructional position in the district office. His career is most likely ruined, and it will be difficult for others to trust him ever again. Plagiarism is that serious. By the consequences, I'm sure you can see that the school board felt Mr. Stenner's actions were wrong. I'm also guessing that you think they're wrong as well. Let's take a minute and consider what PBA would think about these actions. As we'll see from the policies identified later in this presentation, PBA would consider Mr. Stenner's actions wrong. It is a serious act of dishonesty, and it is a violation of academic integrity. Before we take a look at what plagiarism is, let's first consider what it is not. Many people believe that plagiarism is simply using the words of another person. This is actually part of the definition of plagiarism, but it is not the entire definition. So what is plagiarism? Plagiarism is stealing another person's ideas. So whether it is speech, writing, a table, a graph, a photograph, anything that is the idea of another person and you use it as your own is considered plagiarism. And plagiarism is always wrong. One way to avoid plagiarism is to understand how to use source material in your assignments. Knowing the difference between quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing can help you best integrate material in a professional manner and also help you avoid plagiarism. The first way to integrate source material is by using a quote. Quoting is using exact information from a source, whether it's words, a diagram, an illustration, a table, a photo, or anything that you use, it is exactly as it was used from an original source. Keep in mind that if it is a quotation, it must be in quotation marks, and if it is in quotation marks, your reader will assume that it is quoted material. Let's first take a look at a quotation example. What you'll notice that these are in APA format, and the required information for each quotation is the author's last name, the year of publication, and the page number on which the information is found. Let's take a look at the first example, where you'll see the entire citation information at the end of the quotation sentence. So you have an introduction to the quotation. It is important to note that, the actual quotation itself, and then at the end of the sentence, you've got the author's last names, and in this case, there are two authors, the publication year, and the page number. Close the parentheses, and there's a period on the outside. So this is one way to integrate a quotation into your paper. Another way to integrate that quotation is to put the author's names within the context of the sentence. So in this case, we're using them as the introductory phrase for the quotation. Broer and Bessling, and then we have the year of publication right after their names, state. Then you have the quotation, and then at the very end, you're including the page number. So this is a way to integrate quotations into your assignment or your paper. And then you also have to cite them on the references page as well. And the citation on the references page has much more information than just the author's last name, the year, and the page number. But you can refer to the APA Style Manual or get help at the Center for Writing Excellence in order to cite those properly. Now let's consider paraphrasing. Most people understand that a paraphrase is when you take source information and you rewrite it or represent it in your own words. A paraphrase may include specific terminology, in which case you would put those specific terms within quotation marks. A paraphrase is about the same length as a quotation, and what's most important is that you must cite the source of the paraphrase, both in the text and on a references page. Here's an example of a paraphrase based on the quotation. One important fact to consider is that at your level of education, almost all unintentional plagiarism results from inadequate paraphrasing and the citations of that paraphrase. So when you're paraphrasing in particular, be sure that you are citing appropriately. Finally, let's consider summarizing. When you summarize material, you're offering broad, general information. It is often an interpretation of what something means, something that you can condense into your own ideas or thoughts. It's important to decide if the summary information is all your idea, because then you do not need to cite it. If you use key terms or a paraphrase, you must treat it as a paraphrase or a quotation and cite it accordingly. The only two things that you are not required to cite are common knowledge and your own original idea. So if your summarization has only your original ideas or common knowledge, then you do not need to cite it. If it has any other information, you must cite that in the text as well as on the references page. Here's a summary example. This is based on the quotation that we've been looking at so far. The summary says, "I do not think there are enough effective medications to properly treat depression." This is a summary because I have read the source material, I have understood it, I have analyzed it and synthesized it, and now I'm communicating to my audience what I believe about this particular topic. I do not need to cite it specifically because this is my original idea. Let's look again at a definition of plagiarism. Plagiarism is using another person's ideas, words, or data in writing, in speech, in graphics, or incorporated into tables or charts as if they were your own. Remember, if it is not common knowledge and it is not your original idea, then the idea comes from another source and you must cite that appropriately. There are specific requirements that you should follow when you're using someone else's ideas or information. We offer the IDC method to avoid plagiarism, particularly unintentional plagiarism. You can avoid unintentional plagiarism by indicating that the material came from a source other than yourself, by distinguishing that material from other material of your own or from material from different sources, and then also by citing the source of that material both in the text and on a references page. Let's begin with the I, or indicate. As we said before, you want to make sure to use quotation marks around any exact wording from your original source. That is extremely important so that the information is identified as a quotation. If you're paraphrasing and you're using a technical or specific term from the source, even if it is only one word, that word must be in quotation marks and cited even though it's within a paraphrase. The best way to indicate your information is to use a signal phrase. That signal phrase will introduce a quotation. It will also lead the reader from your information to the source information that you're now using. On a side note, be sure that you vary your sentence structure. If you're continuously using the same sentence structure over and over again, your paper becomes very boring for your reader. So make sure that you look up and identify different ways for you to indicate your source information. Many times students want to mash together information from a variety of sources and their own ideas and thoughts within one paragraph. This can be confusing not only for the reader, but for the student as well, and is often one of the most common forms of plagiarism. Keep in mind that both you and the reader must be able to distinguish your ideas and words from the source's ideas and words. They must also be able to distinguish each of your source ideas from one another. That means every time you use a quotation or a paraphrase, you must cite it within the text of the paper at the time you're using the source information. You can't wait to cite at the end of the paragraph or to only cite at the end of the paper on the references page. In order to cite information properly, you should use the APA Manual of Style. Currently, the most recent version was published in 2010. However, you should always make sure that you have the most current copy. It is always best to purchase the book whenever possible. That way you can use post-it notes, write in the text, and really indicate things that you use frequently. Don't try to commit this to memorization. Make sure that you use the book effectively. You can also borrow the book from the library's circulation desk, though you can't write in that copy. You could also make an appointment with the Center for Writing Excellence, and they can help you with your formatting. You must cite sources within the text and on the references page. Be sure that you avoid citation generators. I know that they are very tempting, but try to avoid that temptation. Citation generators often do not have the most current version of the citation information that you need. Consequently, you can have mistakes in it. They are also known for adding extra spaces, odd characters, and a variety of other mistakes. You would need to go through each source and check it all anyway, so it's really best to just do it yourself from the very beginning. Assignments that you submit as a student in the Gregory School of Pharmacy or in any academic situation must meet all three of those conditions: indicate, distinguish, and cite. Keep in mind that if you miss any one of those conditions, then you are guilty of plagiarism, even if you did not intend to cheat. As indicated before, make sure that you're using the most current version of the APA Style Manual. At the present time, it is the 2010 version, but you should always check to make sure that that is still the most recent version. Sometimes professors have a little twist on their APA style. They'd like you to do something differently than what it says in the manual. In that case, you should always follow that professor's requirements for that specific class. Do not transfer those variations to other classes without checking with the professors first. When in doubt, ask before an assignment is due. And again, make sure that you have your own copy of the most current APA manual. I realize that I've said this several times already, but I can't emphasize how important it is to do this. So why again is plagiarism wrong? Because it is stealing. Imagine if you developed your own ideas, you put together an experiment, you wrote a research paper, you came up with some new findings about a particular drug. Then someone else took your information, put it into their experiment, their paper, their findings without giving you credit. That is stealing your information, your ideas, and that is plagiarism. Keep in mind that ignorance or not intending to plagiarize is not an excuse. The consequences for unintentional plagiarism are typically the same as for intentional plagiarism, so keep that in mind. PBA's specific position on plagiarism can be found in the graduate catalog. I've listed the link before, but I'm sure you can find it through my PBA as well. PBA says that plagiarism is universally recognized as a serious form of dishonesty, not just in academic assignments, but on the job and in the community. Overall, the policy states the academy, or the broad university community, views academic dishonesty as a serious academic offense and a failure of character and personal integrity. As pharmacists, I can only imagine that you would not want this characterization attached to your name. As I said, there are consequences for academic plagiarism. Minimally, you would receive a 0 on the assignment. Other consequences may include, but are not necessarily limited to, failing a class, academic probation, a plagiarism remediation program, or removal from the graduate program itself. So let's try some questions and answers and see how you're doing. If plagiarism involves using other people's work as if it were your own, then you can't possibly plagiarize from yourself, right? So take a minute and think about that. Is it possible to plagiarize your own work? It is possible to plagiarize yourself. It is academically dishonest to submit part of an assignment that you prepared for one course, even if that course was at a different school or a different program, and then use that assignment for another course. Basically, each assignment is attached to the actual class and the actual assignment for which it was given. If you have some past homework, a past paper that you feel is either partially or fully relevant to a new assignment, you must first discuss this with your professor. And if you do get permission, you must still use IDC in that material in your new assignment, just as you would with any other source. So the bottom line is, if you are given permission to use prior work, yes, you must cite yourself. Here's another question to consider. What about the stuff I learn in class? I'm paying for my classes, so I can use material from my professor without IDC, right? Take a second and think about that. The answer is no. Your professor or guest lecturer is not you. That in and of itself means you must cite that information. Keep in mind that anything your professor uses in class, whether it's a website they put together, handouts, lectures, those are all intellectual property of the professor or of the sources that your professor IDCs in your course materials. If you are unsure how to properly IDC the material that you glean from class, consult your professor before you submit your assignment. Here's another question. What is one tool that professors use to help identify plagiarism? First, keep in mind that your professors are smart and they're experts in the field. That means they can often identify plagiarism just by looking at the material presented to them. They also will have you most likely turn in assignments through Canvas, our learning management system, and through Canvas, your assignment will be filtered through turnitin.com. Turnitin.com checks originality of the material that's submitted to it. It looks at that information and matches it according to things on the internet, according to numerous databases of scholarly publications, but it also matches it to Turnitin's own database that consists of all the assignments that have ever been submitted to Turnitin. So when you submit an assignment and it goes to Turnitin, that becomes part of Turnitin's database. It will then use that information to check other assignments that are submitted to it, regardless of whether those assignments are from Palm Beach Atlantic University or from some other university or school. For each assignment, the professor receives a confidential originality report that he or she can further examine to determine whether or not plagiarism occurred. Keep in mind that your professors are not obligated to notify you or remind you that assignments will be submitted to turn it in. You should assume that all of your assignments in the Gregory School of Pharmacy will be screened by turnitin.com. So here's another question. What resources are available to help you avoid unintentional plagiarism? Are there any resources? Yes, you've got the APA Style Manual, as we've mentioned several times. You have access to the Center for Writing Excellence, which is a PBA service that has already been incorporated into your fees and tuition, so you definitely want to take advantage of the service. The only other credible place to look for citation information is the Purdue University Online Writing Lab, otherwise known as OWL. And then some final thoughts. We're going to borrow this idea from the well-known DirecTV advertising campaign. When you get an assignment in the Gregory School of Pharmacy at PBA and you paraphrase some sentences from a website about the same topic and paste them into your assignment without indicating that you got those ideas from some other source besides your own brain, you get busted for plagiarism. When you get busted for plagiarism, you get a 0 on that assignment and lose the trust and respect of your professor. When you get a 0 on that assignment and lose the trust and respect of your professor, you fail the course and lose respect for yourself. When you fail the course and lose respect for yourself, you skip class to stay home all day eating junk food and playing video games. When you stay home all day eating junk food and playing video games, you flunk out of pharmacy school. When you flunk out of pharmacy school, thousands of innocent people are left in the hands of the inferior pharmacists who did not graduate from the Gregory School of Pharmacy at PBA. Don't leave thousands of innocent people in the hands of inferior pharmacists. Let's get rid of plagiarism. Thank you for your attention. This presentation has been sponsored by the Center for Writing Excellence at Palm Beach Atlantic University. Please come and visit us and we can help you avoid plagiarism.